We are building the Hungry Traveling Snake project from the YBite Python curriculum available at www.ybyte.in. In the previous video, we saw how we could move the first segment of the tail along with the snake head. The idea was very interesting. We basically moved the segment to the same position as the snake head, causing a momentary overlap, but then the snake head moved away, which caused a nice animation and kept the whole thing moving. Now, just generalizing that a little bit, just like segment 0 went to position of the snake head, segment 1 must go to the position of segment 0, segment 2 goes to position of segment 1, and so on. This keeps repeating every 0.1 seconds. There is a momentary overlap created, but that momentary overlap is resolved because the snake head moves away. So in the end, the effect created is that the snake tail is always following the snake head, and as though it's kind of behind it. Let's see this a little bit more clearly on a timeline. Like I like I said, let's say we have segment the snake head, segment 0, segment 1. We are going to move segment 0 to the head position, segment 1 to the segment 1 position. Momentary overlap, all right, but head moves away. Next, 0.1 second later, let's say snake has eaten one more food. So we have now segment 0, segment 1, segment 2. Segment 0 goes to the head, segment 1 goes to segment 0, segment 2 goes to segment 1. Overlap created, head moves away, and again we are good to go. You can see that in a timeline, every 0.1 second, it will look like the snake is moving forward and all the tails are nicely following it. Now, while this illustration may look, quite simple, but there's actually a deeper point here. We have to do this from the last segment to the first segment, because think about it. My segment 1, for example, has to be moved to the segment 0's position before the segment 0 has moved to the head. And this is very important point. Let's say I did not follow that. Let's say I first move segment 0 to the head. Now I find out segment 0's x and y position. It's the same as the head. In fact, segment 2 will also end up on top of the head. That's not going to work. So what I'm going to do is that I'm just going to do it in the reverse order. I'm going to ask segment 3, hey, look, where is segment 2? Kindly move there. I go to ask segment 2, where is segment 1? Kindly move there. I'm going to ask segment 1, well, segment 0, where is, let's say, the head, move there. Next there's next there is a, let's say, a momentary overlap. The head moves out and everything looks fine. Now the reason I bring this up is because this brings me to the implementation of the code. We are going to use the range gives us a sequence of numbers, but notice that this is reversed over here. So I'm going to say for index of say kk, in range, let's say length of say kk minus 1, 0, minus 1. Now here length of say segments minus 1, because the indexing starts from 0. So if I have 5 elements on the segments, then my last index is actually 4. I'm going to be counting 4, 3, 2, 1, reverse order because the step is minus 1. I'll stop at 1 because my last here is 0 and stops before that. Now, why do I stop at 1? Because remember, I have already taken care of the segment 0. But other than that, the logic is in fact very, very similar to what we did with segment 0. I find out where the segment, the previous segment is, find out the x and y value, and move the present segment over there. Now, let me emphasize 3 important points. This must happen inside the while loop. That's kind of obvious because step has to happen forever. This must happen before segment 0 is moved. This must also happen before the head is moved. And this part has to be very clear. Think through this carefully, look at the animation, and I hope this point is clear, because once we are clear with this, the code is actually quite nice. So I come in here, I just say, look, I'm going to do this before my snake moves. I'm going to do this before the segment 0 is moved. I am going to just set up another for loop over here, and I say, okay, for kk in range. Now remember, I must do this in the reverse side. So I'm going to say length of say segments minus 1 to say stopping at 0 and step of minus 1. I am going to find out, well, the x and y position of where I must move this to. So I just say segments, let's say kk minus 1 dot say x core. I find out the y value, say segments, say kk, minus 1 dot say y core, and I move the segments kk, say kk to, let's say, these x and y values. So go say x and y. Now see the similarity between, so let's just say put a comment here, say other segments Now, really see the similarity between what we did between the snake head and the zeroth segment to what we are doing now, and also see the sequence. Let's see this working. When I eat the food, first one, second one quite nicely fits in there. Third one, you see, all of that is fitting quite nicely. And exactly the way we are working, there is a momentary overlap, but our eyes can't perceive it. But other than that, the animation just keeps working quite fine. Now, before I wrap this up, let's kind of get a little bit more clarity on what this range sequence is doing. Let's just, run this, say, Python, say 3 in the interactive mode. So I just do, for example, for KK in range, say, for example, 4, 0, -1, something like what I'm doing, in my code here. I just say, for example, print KK. Notice it goes 4, 3, 2, 1. That's the start. Step is -1, that's why I'm going reverse counting. I'm stopping at 1 because the stop was 0, and I always stop before the last index is reached. And that's exactly what's going on. We are doing this in the reverse order, and hence it's all working quite well. Notice how we have implemented this. This is actually quite interesting. Like I said, even in the regular snake, the same logic works, except that we will be spawning new turtles to become the tail rather than using the fruit like we are doing in our case. I hope this is interesting for you. I've tried to explain this in detail because I think the dynamics here are really interesting and worth thinking about. If you find that this way of learning by building activities, enhancing them, thinking through them is something that you enjoy, look at our website www.ybyte.in because that's how we learn programming. Take care. Thank you so much. Bye bye.